William is the president and CEO of Technoserve, a nonprofit that develops business innovations and solutions to poverty. William also served as the chief operating officer of PACT Inc. and as president of the PACT Global Microfinance Fund, one of the world's largest microfinance institutions. He was also an executive vice president at Population Services International. He has a bachelor's degree from Yale University and a master's degree in public affairs from the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton University. I know I'm not supposed to pick favorites, but I'm really psyched about this panel. Some of my favorite people in the world are speaking on this panel, real heroes and heroines in the food system who have a lot to say. Before they all come up, I want to share that a young woman at lunch, whose name is Sophie, really hoped that this panel in particular would talk about biodiversity in the food system and the need for diversity in cropping systems. So I hope that we'll be able to do that at least a little bit. And I'm just really excited, again, for all of your questions and comments. This has been a great day so far, and we're not over yet. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming William to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everybody feeling? Everybody get some coffee? Are you ready for the home stretch? Great. I know that many of you focus on domestic, and so I just wanted to make sure those of you that didn't know Technoserve, which is the organization that I lead, briefly, we're a 50-year-old nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting business solutions to poverty. So we do that primarily by working with hundreds of thousands of smallholder farmers in emerging markets all over the world. We help them gain business skills and agronomic skills. We help them access finance where they need to do that, and we help them gain access to markets. And in so doing, help themselves make them more food secure and help them grow their incomes. I got interested in agriculture a very long time ago. I grew up on a farm in rural Virginia, so I had my hands in the dirt as a boy, and remember starting the water boiling on the stove before we'd go out and pick the corn and shuck it on the way back to the house and throw it in. And to this day, I still can't eat corn because it never compares to that corn. Great to be with you here in Chicago. I'm out from Washington, D.C., but I'd like you all to take a little mental trip with me and imagine that you're not in Chicago. Imagine you're in eastern Kenya, and imagine you've got a small farm there. It's about an acre, maybe a little more. You grow corn on this farm primarily. That's the staple crop that you eat every day. But it's not easy. You're sort of near the coast. Soil's a little bit too sandy. You can't buy any improved seeds. There are pests attacking your crops, but you're not quite sure what to do about that. You don't have any fertilizer. And you've got very small harvests. And when you do have enough to sell a little extra, you get the worst price of the year and sell it at a very low price. So consequently, it's very hard to feed your family. And it's even harder to give your children and grandchildren a better future. That is the reality of a woman named Lois Beatrice Chai, who I met a few weeks ago in eastern Kenya. She is a part of a project that's being carried out by Technoserve there. And I mentioned we work with hundreds of thousands of farmers like Beatrice. We know that there are millions of farmers across Africa like her who face the same challenges that Beatrice does. And as very, very hard as they work, they don't have the tools and the information they need to grow more food. They lack access to good buyers and markets and often have to sell at the worst time of the year. We haven't talked about this much today, but it's very much on our mind. They face a changing climate that presents them with many new challenges and much increased risks. Smallholder farmers are really on the front lines of climate change. They have the fewest tools in their toolbox to combat it, and they have the least margin for error. And so it's a very live issue for the farmers we work with. These are some of the issues that the global community's got to address. And Between now and 2050, more than half of the world's population growth is going to take place in Africa. And so for that reason, I feel like we can't talk about the future of food without talking about Africa and about how we can improve the livelihoods of farmers in Africa, about how we can tackle malnutrition there, about how we can close the famous yield gap. Farmers in Africa produce about a fifth as much as their counterparts in developed countries. We've got to talk about how to get African-grown food available for African consumers, because every year the continent of Africa is a net food importer to the tune of about $22 billion a year. So the push to eat local is one that's in a different context in Africa. Happily, I am going to be positive. Happily, there's a lot of innovations in new technology and how we're using some old technologies that can help solve a lot of these problems. Today, people are accessing drones, satellites, and mobile phones to get information about their land, their soil, their crops. Many of us in the United States are using our phones to play Farmville, but farmers in Africa are using theirs to get digital payments for their crops, to access farming advice, to check market prices. There is a series of old box trucks that have been retrofitted with giant video screens, and they are playing training videos for large groups in remote farming communities. There are new models for people to access loans and savings, and in my opinion, most importantly, insurance products to allow these small family farmers to access the basic tools for farming that people here take for granted. The impact can really be enormous. It can be game-changing. When our staff worked with Beatrice, they talked about a market opportunity. The part of Kenya where Beatrice is living, tomatoes are a very desired crop, but they're not grown in that part of the country. And so they are trucked in from relatively far away from another region in Kenya. And so the team there worked with Beatrice to help her for the first time be able to access improved seeds, fertilizer, specialized training, in this case about tomatoes, and help her with ideas about where she could sell her crop. We did this in the context of a cooperative that she was a part of. And I saw her shortly after her first tomato harvest, and she had earned $1,000 from that single tomato harvest, which was greater than her average annual income up to then. We know that these kinds of innovations, often relatively simple things, can work, but there are millions of Beatrices. And how do we give them the chance that Beatrice is getting? It doesn't happen by itself. It happens when the global food community fosters cooperations and builds partnerships and makes the investments needed to scale up these innovations to reach millions of farmers. Right now, we're not, in my view, acting together in ways that are adequately connected or rigorously enough measured or at sufficient scale. I think we need to invest smarter. We need to build on the shared expertise and knowledge of corporations, nonprofits, investors, funders, public officials across these sectors. I absolutely loved the Unlikely Alliances panel earlier. We sit at the center of a number of unlikely alliances every day, and we're absolutely convinced that these problems are so complex that you need these sort of multi-stakeholder unlikely alliances to solve them. We think this kind of work is vital if we want to reach the sustainable development goals that most of the countries in the world have signed up for, of eliminating poverty and eliminating hunger. We think they're vital if we want to fulfill the promises that we made in Paris about climate, to promote climate-resilient development. And we think they're vital if we want to build a vibrant and resilient and sustainable food system that includes everyone. So because a key part of the future of food depends on the future of food in Africa. So thank you very much.